So one of the darkest sections now is it's an iceberg, but it's in a lot of shadow. And you've got some highlights there. And we could always add some more highlights with some white paint later. This section here at the front actually is another iceberg. So that's the shadow of it underneath. You've just got to try and identify sections with their colours. So you just got to think about where these colours appear elsewhere in the image. And try and use that in all relevant sections whilst you have the colour on the brush. It's a bit of a kind of like a greener, slightly greener tone. Okay, now where else do I see that? Possibly in this section here. And I possibly see that colour in this lower section here. I will wash over this piece at some stage. So you don't, basically, once you've introduced a colour, you don't want it to be isolated in one area. You need a visual link to other sections of the work using a similar colour, just to help marry elements of the image together. Some texture here, and obviously the bright white bits that we've preserved. There's a shadow section coming down here, so maybe I'll add a bit more colour here before it hits that light bit. This is where the style of your own drawing style and painting style really start showing. It's like I'm painting, but I'm kind of drawing as well. It's like obviously introducing my own style to it as I'm going along, and you will too. Okay, so I feel like I've got the bones of the image there, and the next few stages are going to really be about much more detail. I'm going to take off the masking fluid now. That's dried, and I can see where I'm at with highlights and see whether or not they're harsh on their own and they need softening down. Not too bad, maybe a little bright there, and softening a bit. Again, they're probably a little bit bright there, but at least I've got the white. So now just really working to create more depth of tone, really more shape, exaggerating shadows where necessary, just to bring more impact into certain areas and help to bring things forward. Just try and imagine your darkest darks, lightest lights, you know, think about where there was a dark section here underneath here. I'm going to add a little bit of brown into that just to make it darker. So this is just really the edge where it goes from, it disappears under the water. Okay, and then you've got to think about, well, where does that colour appear again? think about size of brush. So I'm using this size here in the foreground. You will then, when you're doing the equivalent work for the back, you'll need to use your smaller brush. So the equivalent work here is using a smaller brush because it's a tinier suggestion of the same thing going on, but it's further away from me, so scale really helps. And remember the thing about not using as much detail at the back as you do in the foreground, and that will just give that depth to the whole image. So keep working away, identifying different areas as you're going along. You know, deep shadow here, so where else does it appear? Try and think in terms of shapes as you're working. This is the enjoyable part, just really fine-tuning it. This area here I think does look very flat along the top, so what you'll need to do, although it's in a highlight, it's a highlight towards the back edge of it. You can imagine it's almost rounding off as it disappears away from us. It's rounding away, so there'll need to be some level of texture there, level of tone rather, as it curves away from us. It's still a highlight, but leaving it bright white is harsh. Think of the marks that the dry brush makes as it skirts along the surface. Can be quite useful. But this really is now working into it without spoiling it. When you come to these bits here, obviously highlights, yes, but they're a bit too bright, so again you've got to tone those back, and then the highest peak of that is the bit that is in the bright, has the brightest reflection, but everything leading to that is just a little darker. So that's now feels better, and again adding more texture here, and it's only the tops of these pieces that are the brightest white. And this section here has got, and that's the one side that is really bright, so the other side needs to be darker. So now I'm going to finish off with putting some pencil detail on, just adding some shadows and textures here, and little details all around.